From Wood TV8, this is a breaking news alert.
Good morning, I'm Teresa Weekly, breaking in with the news that there will be no school in Michigan for the remainder of the school year. Governor Whitmer signed that executive order this morning, suspending school K through 12 for the remainder of the year. She's getting ready right now to give us an update on that and on how the state is responding to the COVID-19 crisis in Michigan. Here's a look at that executive order saying that this was a difficult decision. Governor Whitmer said that she's a parent and she understands the challenge here in closing schools and what this will mean for parents and guardians. She says there's no video chat or homework packet that can replace the value of a highly trained, experienced teacher working with students in a classroom, but that we must continue to provide equitable educational opportunities for students during this public health crisis. She says that there will be an application for schools to utilize in order to create a localized plan, which she'll make available by April 3rd, so in the next tomorrow. District plans will need to detail how districts will provide opportunities for students to learn remotely and how schools will manage and monitor that progress. It will also provide information on how parents and guardians can learn about all of these different plans. She basically here says she knows that each district's plan is going to be different because there are different communities in each of these districts, but that a plan can include learning by any number of modes of instruction delivery, even a hybrid approach, some online, some distance learning. If the plan relies on online instruction, she says that those districts have to make sure that every student who needs access to an appropriate device will have it with the ability to connect to the internet, and students and families will not be penalized if they can't participate in that alternate learning plan. She also emphasized here that schools have to continue providing mental health care services for students to the extent that they can, and should be ready and willing to help efforts to establish disaster relief child care centers. Teachers and school employees will be paid for the rest of the school year. Student teachers will still be able to get a temporary certification, and current teachers will still be able to get their certifications renewed even if they can't meet all of the requirements due to what's happening. As far as high school seniors are concerned, there have been so many questions about what will happen with them. The governor says that they will have the opportunity to graduate this year so that they can still go on to post-secondary school if that's what they want to do. Additionally, she says all standardized tests previously scheduled for the remainder of the year, including the M-STEP and the SAT, will be canceled. As far as rescheduling those, at this point her plan is to pick a date in October for rising high school seniors to take the SAT and for other high school students to take the PSAT. All of this information has been changing here over the weeks, so she says that she'll continue to make the latest information available on the Michigan.gov website, but she is again getting ready right now to hold her morning news conference where she'll officially announce all of this information. We've been hearing a lot from students and teachers and also superintendents that we've been checking in with here over the last several days about what their plans are, because this news is something that we expected might be coming based on what the governor has been saying. There was an article in Bridge magazine that had said essentially this is what was going to happen, but now the governor has made it official with this executive order. One thing that we're looking into is how many areas don't have access to the internet and what the plan might be. She alluded to the fact that there will be hybrid plans in certain areas. All of this, of course, is because of what's happening right now around the world with COVID-19. And we reached another point yesterday, 3 days in a row, where we have broken records of single-day increases in cases of COVID-19. We now have more than 9,000 in Michigan. 337 people have died in our state. We just continue to see that line going up sharply. We're waiting for that curve to flatten. That's what all these social distancing guidelines, schools being shut down, everything that the governor has put into place, that's the goal with all of that. We also expect to reach a pretty grim milestone around the world today. The projections show, the numbers show, based on the pace that we've been at, that we will reach 1 million cases today of COVID-19 around the world. as we look at more than 200,000 in the U.S. So that is the reasoning behind all of this. I can tell you we are reaching out to superintendents in West Michigan today to find out what plans are in all of these different districts for how this executive order will impact students. I know that in certain districts, students have not been doing homework or getting assignments from teachers, whereas in other districts they have continued to do some online learning and keeping up with what the curriculum is. Next week for a lot of districts we have spring break on the schedule. That will give some of these districts time, another week, to figure out exactly how they want to implement these plans now that we know what's going to happen, and communicate all of that with the parents and the teachers for how they want to move forward now that we know the rest of the school year is canceled. If you're just joining us, that is the news that we're following. We just got this release from the governor in the last 15 minutes. She signed an executive order this morning suspending face-to-face learning at K-12 schools for the rest of the semester. And again, she is at the moment getting ready to make that official with her announcement in her news conference. In addition to the school situation, she'll also go over the state's response to the COVID-19 crisis. So we're waiting for that. And while we wait for that, I can go over a little bit of, again, what she mentioned in this executive order that she signed. One of the things she said was she understands the challenge here in closing down schools permanently for the rest of the year, which is why she's setting some guidelines, she says, for remote learning and making sure that parents have the resources to continue their children's education from their homes. I know there's been some confusion at this point for what exactly schools should be doing, and districts have been waiting for this guidance from the governor before they put plans into place for how to continue the rest of the year. Without knowing if they were going to be going back into the buildings, they didn't have these long-term plans in place. So this executive order, I know, will give a lot of these superintendents the guidance that they needed to create these more long-term plans rather than just trying to send out packets for 2 weeks to get through the short-term shutdown that initially they had thought would be the case. We've already heard from principals and superintendents that they've been actually personally running out Chromebooks to families who don't have all of the technology that they need. I talked with Hudsonville's superintendent about this yesterday, and he said that that's one thing that they've been doing and trying to make sure that everyone has access to the technology they need to do this distance and online learning. I know one thing that they've been concerned about is making sure that every student gets the chance to progress, whether it's a student with special needs, someone in elementary, or those high schoolers who have those tough classes where they're getting ready to take SATs or AP exams. They'll be going over graduation plans now as well. Another superintendent I spoke with yesterday was with Jennison, and he said at that point, yesterday they were planning to have a graduation on May 28th. So we'll be continuing to follow up with these district leaders to see what the plan is now that we have this executive order from the governor. Rick Albin is standing by now. Rick, I know we've been anticipating this announcement from the governor. What are some of the other issues here that you think we'll have to look at as a consequence of this shutdown now for the rest of the year?
Well, I think there are a number of things that are going to have to be figured out. And in the release that the governor sent out, it says each district will have to come up with their own plan because it's not going to be one size fits all. And I know the districts are scrambling right now to come up with a dual pathway of distance learning by using electronic communication. People are using video chats. Obviously, a lot of school districts have devices that they put in their children's and their students' hands. If they're able to access Wi-Fi from their homes, that really helps to facilitate. But we also know that not all school districts have those devices and not all homes have Wi-Fi service available. So there will have to be a number of different opportunities for students to receive that, even if it's an old-fashioned packet of homework that has to be delivered somehow to them. But the governor's order is clear that she wants that education to continue. Now, I heard you talking about some of the contingencies for schools around the area, and one of the things, and I think people have to put this in perspective, particularly if you have a senior in high school. The most important thing, obviously, is getting education, keeping that flow of education coming. But this is also a very important moment in the life of a student to be recognized for that achievement. And I think school districts are very cognizant of trying to do something in the form of a graduation, but we don't know what that will look like because we don't know how long the circumstances that we're in now, like you, Teresa, you've been working at home every other week. I'm obviously working from home. We don't know how long this type of an order is going to stay in place. We know the governor wants it extended, and we know the legislature has some other questions about it, but all of that is part of this issue of closing the school buildings for the rest of the year, and it will fundamentally change the way the children's education process goes forward during that period of time. So I think what the governor has to discuss is the flexibility that she and the Michigan Department of Education will have to allow school districts because they can't all do it the same way, Teresa.
Absolutely, Rick. And I know one of the issues up to this point without that executive order from the governor was that not every district was doing the same thing. Like you said, some districts are using Seesaw or other online applications to continue that learning and communicate with students, whereas certain districts haven't really been doing much of anything due to free access to public education for all. They have to, as they move forward, make sure that everyone has the same access. So there have been some limitations there without the executive order. So I think now, at least, even though the plans will look different for each district, as each district has different needs, they have that, that freedom now to move forward with creating that plan, it seems like.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be important. They're going to have flexibility because these school districts are being asked to gear up and mobilize to do something probably bigger than they've ever had to do, combining both education and technology. I understand that they've been in the business of education for a long time, and technology is something that has rapidly been moved into schools. But to get those two to work together without utilizing the bricks and mortar that they're so used to, it's going to be a pretty heavy learning curve. Now, I have no doubt that school districts can do it, but it's not going to be immediate. And like you say, it's not going to look the same for everybody. I know my two kids have been out of school now since the order went in place, and they've had regular contact through video chats and other ways with their teachers, but not on a daily basis. So now the question is, does this become a daily basis? Are you going to start having regular curriculum where a bunch of students are gathered in their houses all over a district, coming in on Zoom or some other video chat, and that's going to be part of the day? Or are they going to be sending out lessons that have to be sent back? It's going to look different at every place, but I think the thing that the governor will emphasize, and I think the school districts will emphasize, no matter what that plan looks like, it's got to be something that's also going to have to be reinforced at home. So for parents, it's going to be an extra step too, and that's going to be complicated by the fact that some people are being told to stay home because their job's not essential. But if you have a child, for example, who may even be in daycare because both of their parents are considered essential workers, that changes the dynamic. There are a lot of things to be considered here, and we're really just at the beginning. Although I know districts have been planning for this, we are just kind of at the very beginning of how this is going to shake out. And I would urge parents particularly to be a little bit patient because it's going to take a while to get this worked out in a way that's going to work smoothly, but I'm confident in time that will happen, Teresa.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, as you have reiterated, Rick, this is such an evolving situation, and we know that there's a lot that will change here even in the next month. I'm curious to see what happens in the fall. We keep hearing on a national level from national doctors about the concern for a second wave. So even as we get through this first wave, maybe there could be a second wave that comes. So I know that once we even get this initial plan into place, it sounds like even that could change.
Right, and that, I think, may be one of the most important points to make, because whatever planning the school districts do now, in the back of their mind, they've got to be thinking, this has to be sustainable. This has to be something that and as I stand here today, and I share everybody's hope that it doesn't have to happen, but understanding that it might have to happen, that we might be back in a situation in the fall if we see a big rise in cases, school districts may be forced to implement this same type of process in the fall. I mean, I'm not predicting this, but suggest for a moment that what if in August, in late August, if the CDC starts giving warnings again, the school districts start by doing distance learning. I mean, all that's a possibility. Possibilities we hope don't really come to bear fruit, but I think as these plans are being implemented now, that's got to be something they're thinking about. And the unexpected positive impact of this is going to be, once these plans are in place, then you have a fallback position if it becomes necessary. Again, hoping it doesn't, but they've got that if they need it in the fall, Teresa.
And we're reaching out right now, Rick, to some of these superintendents that we've heard from. Lindsay McComo has been in contact with them as well in the last couple of days as we anticipated some of this news. She joins us on the phone now. When you were talking to a couple of these superintendents, Lindsay, what did they say as we anticipated this announcement about their plan moving forward?
Well, Teresa, unfortunately, one of the big obstacles that a lot of districts will be facing, and touch base with both Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids Public Schools yesterday, is that some of their families, in Kalamazoo's case about a third, with Grand Rapids about a fourth or so, don't have the technology readily available nor the internet connection at home set up in order for them to then immediately start remote learning. So that's one thing. So in Grand Rapids' case, they've been trying to come up with a plan in anticipation of this. One thing they've been doing is looking at getting hotspots to families in order for them to be able to, rely on remote learning, anticipating, unfortunately, that the kids won't be returning to the classroom for the rest of the year. So one thing they're looking at is trying to get those hotspots, but the district told me yesterday that that could be about $2 million just to make sure that every family is equipped to learn like that. So that's one thing we'll certainly be working on today. I'm also going to be reaching out to Rockford Public Schools. We intend to get a plan from them. I've reached out to Zeeland and Muskegon as well, and that's really one big thing that they'll be trying to work on to navigate all of this for their students.
And another thing that we've looked at here in terms of internet access, if you're just considering people who don't have the internet, but it exists in their area. I know Comcast, through Internet Essentials, has offered 2 to 3 months of service for free right now, and that's something that Portage Public Schools, for example, have been utilizing to try and get internet into homes that don't have it. That is affordable high-speed internet, and that's specifically for low-income homes. But that's one avenue that they're taking to try and get that internet access. But Lindsay, the other issue here is not every home even has internet available to hook up to it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's where those hotspots would come in, but that's also an area then where you're looking at data having to be loaded into those hotspots. And unfortunately, it's going to be a big obstacle for schools to try to navigate. I can tell you, with speaking with school leaders from around West Michigan, they're very committed to taking on this obstacle, while also recognizing that this is a huge undertaking for them. Even John Helmholt yesterday with GRPS saying that they're asking for grace. They're asking for, parents to be understanding and to be patient as they navigate this, because as much as they can have plans in place and be able to adapt and put curriculum online and try to get those students who are set up to learn online doing that right away, this is something that no district has had to navigate in order to try to make sure that all of their students have the equal opportunity to learn outside of the classroom. So it's certainly a huge undertaking, and it's something that these districts will have to navigate. I know some of the superintendents have been meeting regularly just to bounce ideas off of each other in order to try to, all get on the same page and figure out what best practices are and figure out what works. We know that teachers have been reaching out to students directly, trying to help bridge the gap in any way they can. We know that teachers are incredibly committed to their careers, and they're also trying to navigate this, and they're working with administration as well, trying to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to still learn the curriculum. For instance, in Kalamazoo, they've been printing out learning packets, assignments, and then giving those out to the families at their 24 meal sites, So that's one way that they've been trying to work around the issues with some families not having internet access, not having devices that would allow for them to access that curriculum online. So that's something I anticipate we'll start to see a lot more of as well, with districts relying on printing out those materials in their buildings and then getting them to families as quickly and as best as possible.
Just to catch everyone up on what's happening here, the governor signed an executive order this morning suspending K through 12 in-person education for the rest of the semester, and has said that they are working on plans now for how to proceed, and that will look different from district to district. The governor is supposed to be giving a news conference right now. Is actually supposed to start more than 10 minutes ago to go over some of this information and what's in the executive order, as well as the state's response to this COVID-19 crisis in Michigan. So we're waiting for that to happen still. We have been reaching out to superintendents. We've talked with several in the West Michigan area in the last day. Even after this announcement came down in the last 30 minutes, we're hearing from superintendents basically that they're now trying to figure all of this out and communicate with their staff about how they plan to move forward. So we'll continue to get that information from our district leaders and let you know what the plans are in the various districts in West Michigan. Rick Albin has been following all of this news as well. Rick, what do you think the biggest challenge, aside from the technology aspect and who has access to internet, will be here for all of these districts as they process this information that just came down in the last 30 minutes?
Well, outside of technology, I think the biggest challenge is going to be not being in the environment with a professional instructor. I mean, let's not for a minute take for granted what our professional teaching staff bring to the classroom and how they facilitate our kids as they're learning. And so, I mean, I think that's a big component that's going to be missing. It's different when you're talking over a video chat and you're only doing it on a limited basis. And while parents, myself included, we'll do everything we can to help out. Let's face it, I'm not a professional teacher, and that wasn't what I studied for. And so I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, because particularly when you're talking about, I have elementary kids, and they have a real bond with their teachers, and so I think that helps the learning process. So I think that's going to be a significant challenge, but we also have to take into consideration that this is going to be one of numerous challenges. You know, the education of our students will be a big challenge, and trying to figure that out for school districts will be a big challenge, just like it's going to be a big challenge for people who have been laid off, who may have jobs that aren't coming back. We know that there are various industries that are feeling the impact of this much worse than others. And so I think the list of challenges is long, and if we can approach them each as we have to deal with them, I think we can probably move through this. But as it pertains to education, I think there are a lot of layers here. But I think most importantly, we also know that our school districts have the curriculum. They know the information that they want to get out, and I have no doubt that in a relatively short time, but I think we need to give them some time, in a relatively short time, they'll be able to communicate that to the parents and students and let them start making some progress. And that education process is going to be for parents too, because a lot of that's going to fall on them, particularly those that are going to be at home. It's going to fall on them to make sure their kids follow through and continue with that education, Teresa.
A lot of these parents are working from home while now also trying to act as homeschool teachers or facilitators anyway. So it's certainly a challenge for a lot of people. Thanks, Rick, for some of that insight. We also have John Helmholt on the phone now, representative with Grand Rapids Public Schools. Good morning, John.
Hey, good morning.
So now that we have this news, what is the process to move forward for Grand Rapids Public Schools?
Sure. First, we want to express our thanks and appreciation to Governor Whitmer. She has been very clear and decisive in her leadership. We anticipated that this was coming. They have been very thoughtful in getting advanced communications to the school districts. And as we've said in our previous communications with the media, with our staff and our parents and guardians, the district since day one, we've been planning on kind of the worst case scenario, that school could be shut down for the remainder of the year. and we've been working to develop comprehensive plans for distance learning, including how we account for technology and devices that may need to be distributed, as well as internet accessibility, which may also need to be distributed in the form of wireless hotspots or something else. And so this is a heavy lift, but we've been gearing up for this, and we just want to assure our parents and our students and staff that we're going to do everything possible to plan for this. But as another superintendent was interviewed recently, they said, we're going to fail at this. This is the first time in 150 years this district's ever embarked in something like this. And so we know there are going to be implementation challenges. There's going to be bumps along the way, but we're going to make those mid-course adjustments. We're going to do everything in our power to get the technology in the hands of those families that need it, that do not currently have the technology and the devices. We have thousands of Chromebooks that are in our schools right now. We have iPads that are used at the early elementary level. And so we will be communicating with staff and parents in the coming days and weeks about how we're going to roll all this out.
So John, as you talk about the technology piece, you have the Chromebooks, but as far as getting those hotspots, and in your conversations, in the district's conversations with the governor about this, how will the state help with the financial burden of getting this technology and the internet access out to all of those families? Has there been discussion about that?
Not extensively. That's something that, obviously we are hopeful that the state and ultimately the federal government will be able to free up funds to support this. Our budget for this rollout is about nearly $2 million to provide to secure the learning management systems that are needed for the distance learning, to distribute the Chromebooks, the iPads, the wireless hotspots. And so we're also fortunate that we have a number of business and philanthropic leaders who've reached out to the district that have been working side by side with us and have committed to helping raise private funds to support this as well. We have to assume that we're moving forward without any additional dollars. In fact, we're already being told that the state budget for next school year could be cut substantially due to the significant loss of sales tax revenue, which is 75% of our funding comes from the state sales tax. And so we're anticipating pretty substantial per pupil reduction for next school year. So we've got to do everything we can locally with the support of our philanthropic and corporate community to make those adjustments.
Another question, and this is regarding students with special needs. I've heard from a lot of parents wondering what districts are going to be doing to support those students who might have different needs that can't necessarily be met as well in a virtual or distance learning environment. What have the discussions around that been?
Yeah, all means all. Our plan that we're developing is to ensure that we're providing equitable teaching and learning for all students, inclusive of those students that may have a 504, an individualized education plan, or they may be English language learners. And the governor's executive order, she and the state are going to seek some waivers from the federal government to allow for flexibility. As you can imagine, in this distance learning plan, we're going to do everything we can to comply fully and as best we can, but I think the state is acknowledging and recognizing there may need to be a little bit of flexibility. And so, but again, our plan is all means all. That was the directive from the Michigan Department of Education that came out a few weeks ago. And so we've been building our plan based on that.
Okay, that is John Helmholt with Grand Rapids Public Schools on the phone with us. Thank you, John. Just to catch everyone up, we are waiting to hear from Governor Whitmer about the executive order she signed this morning suspending K-12 education face-to-face learning for the remainder of the school year. She is getting ready right now to talk about that in a news conference that was supposed to start at 10:30 this morning. So we'll continue to wait for that as we communicate with different district leaders around West Michigan, including with Godfrey-Lee Public Schools. A representative joining me on the phone right now to talk about plans there. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what is the plan for Godfrey-Lee? I know everyone is catching up to the information and trying to work this out, although this wasn't unexpected necessarily.
I think first and foremost, it's heartbreaking for our students, families, and staff that we're at this point, but everyone understands that it's a public health crisis, and we all need to do our part. And so, our plan to this point has been supporting our families with food distribution. We have distributed over 40,000 meals since the closure started, and making sure that our basic needs of our families are met. In the meantime, we've had staff and administrators working behind the scenes to create plans that we anticipate rolling out soon in the next day or two to our community to demonstrate our commitment to continued learning throughout the rest of the school year.
What are the biggest concerns you've heard from parents about how this is all going to move forward? I know the big question many have had is what is going to happen now that we have this directive from the governor that face-to-face learning is done for the rest of the semester. What have their other concerns been?
Well, we're in the relationships business, and so that connection that our students have with our staff and vice versa and with their families is going to have to look different. And so we want to make sure that we still maintain, the social emotional well-being of our students as we go forward. But the concerns that we've had from parents, they want to make sure that their children don't miss out on meaningful learning this school year. They want them to be prepared for the next stages of their academic career, and in particular, our seniors. They are, eager to continue their journey on to college, and they want to make sure that they have everything in place to be successful when they get there. And that's going to be critical to all of our district's plans. And throughout Kent ISD, we've been collaborating with each other to, really work together so we can learn from each other and make sure that all students are well cared for.
This is Kevin Polston, the Godfrey Lee Superintendent. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know you have a lot to communicate to your other leaders in your district and the teachers in the district, so we appreciate your time.
All right, thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, Governor Whitmer is now starting her news conference to let us know exactly what's in her executive order and how she plans to move forward. She's just getting ready to start that news conference right now.
We've received
we're gonna
400
check in with her and see what
from
the situation
Strategic
is here.
National Stockpile on Tuesday. I spoke with the president that day as well, and he said more are on the way, and that is great. We are grateful, but we still need a lot more. We recently announced that Detroit will be one of the first cities in America to receive 5 testing machines and 5,000 kits from Abbott Labs. The mayor acknowledged that yesterday. These tests will be used to test police and fire, EMS, and DDOT workers. The technology produces results in 15 minutes, and that's fantastic. Each machine does 1 sample at a time, so Detroit will have the capacity to do about 20 to 50 results per hour, and that's why it's got to be focused on our frontline providers. On Monday, President Trump granted my request for a formal mission assignment to allocate and order up to 3,000 members of the Michigan Army and Air National Guard for up to 90 days to perform humanitarian missions across the state. Our National Guardsmen and women will do things like help run mobile screening facilities, distribute food and medical supplies, ensure resiliency in supply lines, disinfect public spaces, and support public safety when required. Executive orders. I have formally declared a state of disaster and sent a letter to Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey and House Speaker Lee Chatfield requesting a concurrent resolution extending the state of emergency and disaster by 70 days. We have suspended the April 1st requirement for lower vapor pressure gasoline. We have placed a temporary restriction on non-essential veterinary procedures during the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses have stepped up, and we are grateful. The big 3 all are working on 1 or more of the following: face shields, respirators, masks, as well as ventilators. The Greektown Casino has stepped up and is putting first responders up so that they don't have to worry about spreading the disease to their families. And that's a wonderful thing that they're doing to support the front line in Detroit. Delta Airlines is providing free flights for medical professionals to travel to areas that need help. And we know that Michigan is one of those areas, and we're grateful for their partnership. Magnum Tools in Romulus is making countertop sneeze guards for businesses in the area to protect employees and patrons. Great Lakes Wine and Spirits is beginning working with local restaurants to send 2 meals a week home for their employees and their families. And High Velocity Sports in Canton will offer a drive-through free lunch for anyone in need on weekdays. We are grateful that so many Michigan businesses are doing their part, large and small businesses alike. We've updated our numbers daily. As of yesterday at 3 o'clock, we had 9,334 cases, 337 deaths. I think it's incumbent on every one of us to remember that each of those people was a Michigander with a story, with a family and friends who can't mourn them as we traditionally would because we can't congregate. And it's important for us to remember this. This is what's at stake, Michigan lives. Michigan is a hotspot for COVID-19 cases. We're on the upswing. Our numbers continue to climb every day. We found nearly 3,000 more positive cases since I sat last in this chair on Monday. We know that the apex probably not end April, beginning of May. For a month, we'll hit the height of this. I need to reiterate every time I address you that no one is immune from this virus. People of all ages and all walks of life are testing positive across our state every single day. This virus moves easily from person to person. Even if you don't feel sick, you could be carrying it. I was struck by one of the stories I saw on the news just this morning of a special education teacher who's 30 years old who passed away after 3 days of combating the symptoms of COVID-19. His wife had it as well and hardly had a fever. Each of us responds differently to this disease, and that's why we all must act as though we could be carrying it and stay home. Just one person with this virus can infect another 40, and then in turn, they can infect thousands more. We must do everything we can to protect our families, our communities, our dedicated health professionals, and everyone on the front line. COVID-19 will touch every one of our lives in some way or another, so we all must do our part. Today, I'm signing an executive order to close school buildings to students for the remainder of the calendar year, the school calendar year. All in-person instruction for K-12 students will be suspended, and all school buildings will be closed for the remainder of this school year. This doesn't mean our kids will stop learning. Each district must develop an alternative learning plan for students to continue their education during this time. Plans will be different based on district. The plans will be locally driven and reflect the best interests of the kids in their communities. That means learning by phone or mail or online. That means project-based learning and paper packets, telephone lessons, and things that can be used as means of alternative mode of delivering instruction. Districts must make sure that their plans are appropriate and accessible for families in their schools. If the plan relies on some online instruction, the district should ensure that every student has access to an appropriate device with an ability to connect to the internet. Students and families will not be punished if they are unable to participate in their alternate learning plan. My personal intent is to ensure and implore all districts to have a plan so that graduating seniors, this class of 2020, graduates on time. Our dedicated educators, teachers, secretaries, parapros, and custodial and cafeteria workers will be paid for the remainder of the school year. Now, I know this is hard, and I know that this raises a lot of questions, from parents to students. I was getting text messages from my own child before I came out here, asking questions about how this is going to work. I know that there is a lot of anxiety about how we're going to move forward and meet the needs of our kids. I feel it too. As a parent of 2 high schoolers, both of whom are going to miss out on prom this year, and a senior who's asking the same questions about graduation, we feel it in our own household. But this is the best thing that we can do for the health of our children, for the tens of thousands of educators in Michigan who work in our schools. This will ensure more kids and educators will return to school happy and healthy at the start of next school year. It will protect more families from the spread of COVID-19, and it will help us return to life sooner. Over the past few weeks, we've seen teachers across our state step up and find creative ways to continue reaching their students. Like Mrs. Wilson in St. John's, who wrote letters to her 6th grade class to let them know she's thinking of them. And the teachers at Holland Public Schools who are providing meals to families, hosting Zoom calls, and sending notes to their students. Like my friend Mrs. Johnson, who's at Plymouth Canton. She's a kindergarten teacher, and she and her colleagues drove through neighborhoods waving at students. It took them 2 hours, but they wanted to make sure students knew that they were there for them. And like Lauren from Stony Creek, who has created a virtual band room with her students, setting up time for them to collaborate with professional musicians. And Nora in Detroit, who makes daily video lessons for her kids, while her husband Lane, a district chef, is helping provide meals for families who need them. Our teachers' #1 priority from Detroit to Holland to the Upper Peninsula is ensuring a great education and a healthy learning environment for our kids. Now, I know this will be tough, and it will require creativity and hard work and problem solving. But in my time in public service, I've met educators across our state who I know are eager to rise to this challenge. Our teachers are some of the hardest working people I know. I know that they will help guide our students through this tough time, and I will do everything in my power to support them and help guide them through this. I also want to take a moment to thank Michigan parents. Parents who have spent every day with their kids, trying to keep them entertained and inspired, trying to keep them reading and working on math or science with them. Being a parent is one of the hardest and one of the best jobs there is. I'm grateful to those of you who continue to work from home and take care of your kids. I know it's hard, and when your kids get over, they will remember these days when they got to spend a little more time with their parents. They'll remember the activities that you did together. They will be grateful, ultimately, that we all pulled together to meet their needs. I'm imploring you also to make sure that as you're engaging with your kids, that you're educating them in an age-appropriate manner on how to learn about what is happening in our world right now and how to cope with it. These last few weeks have been tough for Michiganders. They've been tough for all Americans, but we know right here in Michigan we have got a big challenge. Our families, our workers, and all of our mental health has been stretched. This is a challenge unlike anything we've ever faced before. I know many of you tune in every week hoping for some good news, hoping I'll say something that shows we're ready to turn back to life as normal. I ask that until that day comes, you keep making smart choices. I ask that everyone who can volunteer in healthcare centers or donate blood or money to their local food bank or medical supplies, visit michigan.gov/FightCovid-19. Stay home, stay safe, and every day that you do, we will get one step closer to the end. I want to thank the hardworking men and women in our grocery stores, in the UFCW and Kroger and Meijer, and the people that are making sure we've got food for our families. I want to thank the janitorial services across the state that are cleaning all of these environments so that when we are out, we're safer. And I want to thank the teachers and, of course, our nurses and doctors, respiratory therapists, and everyone in our healthcare system. And with that, I want to thank and turn it over to the person that I learned the most from, that I lean on the most, Dr. Janae Caldoun, our Chief Medical Executive.
Thank you, Governor Whitmer. COVID-19 in Michigan continues to be a true public health crisis. We're not sure of the exact date when cases are going to peak in the state, but as of right now, we know we are still on the upslope. We've identified more than 1,000 new cases each day over the past few days. As of yesterday, as the governor mentioned, Michigan had 9,334 cases and 337 deaths. We expect to announce more cases and more deaths later today. We've talked a lot about our goals when it comes to the public health strategy in Michigan. We do not have a vaccine and we don't have an antiviral treatment. Because of that, social distancing is really the one thing we must do and do very well to get ahead of this virus. We must prevent as many people as possible from getting the disease. We must protect our residents who are most vulnerable to becoming very ill, the elderly, and those who have underlying medical conditions. We also have to understand that no one is immune. There are people who are young, there are people who do not have underlying medical conditions, who are getting sick and are dying. We must heed the governor's executive order to stay home and stay safe. People must stay home if they are sick. We have evidence that even if you feel well, you could still be spreading the disease to others. Do not leave your house unless you absolutely must, and maintain social distancing while you are out. We also have to make sure our hospitals have the capacity to take care of the sick. We know that many of our hospitals on the front lines taking care of patients are at capacity right now. Intensive care units are full, hospitals are running low on masks and gowns, and if they have them, some are actually needing to reuse them between patients. We also know some hospitals are running low on critical medications like albuterol and sedation medications that are necessary to help people breathe or to make sure they can be safely maintained on a ventilator while someone's body heals from the coronavirus. The state is working as hard as it can to support our hospitals. I've truly been humbled by the number of people who have reached out to help us get masks or to volunteer their services. Our colleagues in the federal government have been listening, and they've sent us some supplies, although we know it will not be enough. We will continue to work around the clock to get our hospitals the supplies that they need. We've also already identified the TCF Center in Detroit as a site for some patients who have COVID-19. Given the expected trajectory of COVID-19 in the state, we will likely need additional facilities. We will also need additional medical professionals, doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, physician assistants, and others to staff them. Please, if you have the skills and you are available, go to our website, www.michigan.gov/fightcovid19 to sign up. The next several weeks are going to be very difficult, some of the most difficult we've ever faced. I encourage everyone to take this seriously and to heed the governor's executive order to stay home and stay safe. I'll turn it back over to you, Governor.
Okay, with that, happy to open it up for some questions.
Can you speak a little bit about how this decision was reached to close the schools? I know it's been several weeks that parents have been wondering when it was going to make a decision. So what was a deciding factor for you?
All right, I know you've got a microphone, but I'm going to repeat questions. I've gotten feedback that it's hard for people to hear the questions. So how did we arrive at this decision on the school year? Not lightly, I'll tell you that. The decision to pull our kids out of school was made based in communication with our chief medical executive as we saw COVID-19 starting to spread across the country. We know that schools are places where kids congregate, they bring things from home, and then they bring things back home. And so it was important that we pull our kids out. We've seen other states take actions to curtail the school year, but we wanted to make sure that before we made any pronouncements, we had a plan. And it was a plan that took into account that we've got 1.5 million children in Michigan in our pupil count, that we've got 56 ISDs across our state. We have over 900 school districts in the state of Michigan, and each has their own set of assets and their own set of challenges. And that's precisely why when a pronouncement was made that we'd taken all of these things into consideration, talking with our Michigan Department of Education, talking with our leaders in the legislature, both sides of the aisle, talking with our frontline educators who are the true experts here. This, we think now, is the right moment to say, here's how we anticipate moving forward to meet the needs of our kids. This is how we are empowering school districts. This is how we are leaving some of the restrictive things that people were grappling with. How do we cope with this? And this is how we can, as a state, start to move forward on individualized plans for districts so that they have the tools they need to meet the kids that they serve.
There are parents right now who are obviously home because they can't go because of the previous executive orders. But at some point, what happens when you have all the students who are out of school because the school buildings are closed, but parents now might be let back to go to work? How did that factor into your decision, and what do you anticipate going forward for that?
Well, at this juncture, we think we're probably a good month out from the apex of COVID-19, and this disease is spreading very fast here in Michigan. We still don't have enough tests to really have confidence in that we know precisely how many people are carrying COVID-19. That's why we've had to take such aggressive steps to mitigate the spread of this. With regard to whether or not there's a lag between when parents get back to work and when kids are back in the classroom, that's a very real possibility. But at this point in time, our decisions have to be made centered with what is in the best interest of the health of our kids and our families and our teachers. And that's precisely why we think that this is the right step now. If perchance it looks like the world can go back to normal before the end of this calendar year, that would be a great issue that we would have to confront. But at this point in time, the most responsible thing we can do is to move forward to work with ISDs and local districts to fashion a plan that meets the needs of the kids that they serve.
Governor, at least one of the legislature's Republican leaders has said that he's not ready to agree to your request for an extension of the executive order. Just what are your thoughts on that, and where do those discussions stand?
Well, a couple things. You know, Michigan is on the front end of taking aggressive steps. That is the smartest thing that we can do when we finally see other states following suit. That's good. They're a little bit late to the science and to the tough decisions that executives need to be making. But the fact of the matter is we are nowhere near the end of COVID-19 in the state of Michigan. As we've stated, as you look at modeling, we know that we are in for a tough 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks here in front of us. And so we are far from out of the emergency that we find ourselves in. We've got to retain every tool we can to combat COVID-19, to keep people safe. The legislature's insistence on coming in next week is something I implored them not to do. We've already lost a member of the legislature to suspected COVID-19. A person of the 110-member House has lost their lives already. I think that is very inadvisable for them to congregate and to start meeting. I think the best thing that we can do is to say this new order, they don't have to come back for at least 28 days, but let's make sure that when they do come back, we have an emergency extension for as long as 70 days if it's necessary. If it's not, great, but let's go the route that we need to protect people. This emergency powers they've been used many times before. Not in a situation like this, I grant it, but in much less serious times, these emergency authorities have been extended much longer than 70 days. For a sinkhole, for instance, for the crisis in Flint, you know, this is a time where we have a unique crisis on our hands. People are dying in our state. It's important that we continue to have the protections for our healthcare workers, and that all depends on extending this emergency. And I ask that the legislature think very seriously about embracing this 70-day extension. It doesn't mean it's embracing a 70-day extension for every other order that I've issued. It simply means that we acknowledge that we are going to be in this emergency, and we're going to need to have unique powers during this time to combat COVID-19 and to save lives.
Going back to the schools topic, a lot of parents are confused about what this means in terms of advancing their kids for the next year or not. I know you said it was important to get those graduating seniors through as well. So can you tell parents what their options are in terms of continuing this school year and then advancing to the next school year?
Yeah, so they will be working with their districts. This does not mean, you know, what we want to make sure is that no student is penalized because of COVID-19, that they are not held back because of this global crisis that we're confronting. And that's precisely why we're encouraging districts to put together their distance learning plans so that they are meeting the needs, acknowledging some of the challenges within these school districts so that every student has the ability to move on to the next grade. We also need to recognize that there will be some challenges and some additional needs this fall when school is resumed. And that's precisely why working with the legislature on the terms of this is important, because it lays the groundwork for the additional supports that we're going to need to give our kids as we think about resuming in the fall.
You mentioned the fall and coming back. If Districts have different plans, they have different access, so you could have a district where most people have access to online education, have pretty high performing district. You also have districts where the access just isn't there, whether it's rural or urban settings. Are you concerned about the gap that could be created in the next month or two, and then expanding on that in the fall, and what conversations need to be had about adjusting some of the standards for what third graders are supposed to know, what fifth graders are supposed to know whenever we get back?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question. I mean, you're touching on precisely the challenge that we have with over 900 school districts across the state with 56 ISDs. We know that whether you are in one part of our state or another, it can be vastly different access to resources, to broadband, to all of the kind of different challenges that districts have. They're not uniform. That's precisely why I've been, for 2 years in a row, pushing an equitable formula in our education budget. We recognize that districts do not have equitable access to all of these things, and that's why it's not one size fits all. It's got to be determined at the local level so that the needs of kids are met, acknowledging the unique challenges that districts are confronting in different parts of our state.
What are you thinking about in terms of a start date for the coming school year?
Well, I think, Rick, it's, we are making decisions right here and now based on the best science and the best data that we can get our hands on. We need more testing. We need to be doing robust testing in order to really assess when and how it's safe to resume life. And that includes what school looks like in the fall. At this juncture, what we know is that it would be too dangerous to have our kids congregating in schools across the state right now. And that's going to be true for the foreseeable future. And that's why it is time to move forward with a distance learning plan for our children, because we acknowledge if we don't hit our apex until late April or mid-May, the school year is pretty much over at that juncture. And that's why we can't wait to see what happens. We've got to start making plans to meet the needs of our kids. So far as what the fall looks like, I don't think that we can with any certainty say we need to start precisely on this day. We are giving districts some flexibility, though. We have gotten rid of the standardized testing requirements. We have ensured that if they want to move to a balanced calendar, they have that ability to do that. We're going to need to work with the legislature to ensure that we've got additional resources to support the unique challenges that schools are going to want to meet and are going to need to be devising at the local level. And so I think that those are all factors that would go into, answering your question. But I think that working with the people on the ground who are the true experts in education of their student bodies is how we proceed and get the best result for our kids.
We've had a lot of people on Facebook Live asking us about unemployment. We've heard that hundreds of thousands of people have been applying for it, trying to get through the system, but they're either not getting a response or just having a hard time getting that benefit, those assistance that they've been needing as a result of COVID-19. Can you give us an update on if there's going to be any changes to the system, if there will be an unemployment task force, anything to support the people of Michigan who have been affected by this?
Yeah, so each of these orders that I've issued, I've said it before, and I think it's worth repeating. They weigh heavily on me. I know that there are a lot of people who are unemployed, and the anxiety that comes with that, and trying to confront a state system that has been completely overwhelmed because there are so many people unemployed. It's not just here in Michigan, it's across the country. Our system's been able to stand up to the increased demand, but it does need additional support, and so we're working on that. In the interim, what we have done is release and loosen some of the previously required actions on behalf of applicants. So it used to be that you'd have to get a certain documentation from your former employer to even be eligible. We've said we're going to make it easier for people to apply. And so my encouragement for folks is that keep attempting to get that application in, but know that we understand the incredible strain on the system, the incredible number of people that are impacted, and we're going to work to make sure that people get the unemployment that they need to get through this crisis.
We're seeing questions about masks and whether people should be wearing masks when they're out in public. There are places now that are starting to require masks. Is there any consideration about making such a requirement here in Michigan?
I'm going to hand that one to Dr. Khaldun.
Sure. So there's no question right now that our frontline hospital workers don't have enough masks. So if there is an N95 mask or a surgical mask, we want it to go directly to our hospital partners. That said, we know that some people may have a mask at home, or they may be able to make a mask out of cloth or a bandana, and if they want to do that and they can, it certainly, they should strongly consider it, and it certainly won't cause any harm.
Has there been any consideration of a curfew, a statewide curfew?
We have not discussed a statewide curfew at this juncture. I will say that the exponential growth in COVID-19 is something that we're all very concerned about. We know that our hospital systems are at capacity in many parts of our state. We know that this great testing that was set up in the city of Detroit has shown that there's a much higher prevalence of COVID-19, I think, than anyone anticipated. The more testing we do, the better. We see numbers go up, and that is concerning for people, but the more testing we can do, the better handle we can get on how prevalent this is and make educated decisions. I know that the mayor of Flint went forward with a curfew this week. I know that that's being talked about at a variety of our sister states, but at this juncture, we've not had that conversation. But we're anticipating and analyzing each of the actions that other areas are taking to be aggressive and to be on the forefront. And so I would anticipate at some point a conversation about that, but there's not been one yet, and there's not a decision right now either.
Dr. Khaldun, we're still seeing lots of people congregating in public spaces that are still open despite the social distancing recommendations. Can you just reiterate the importance of continuing to social distance during this time and staying home if you can?
Absolutely. So the question is, people are still congregating. That's just absolutely just unacceptable. This is so incredibly important that people stay home. No one is immune. You can be 25 years old, healthy, no medical problems. You can easily get the coronavirus, and you could potentially die. I need everyone to understand this is incredibly serious. Take it seriously, stay home, and stay safe.
There are a number of students who have special needs services that are provided through the schools, IEPs, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about what you expect of districts to work with those students in the wide variety of services that they provide? Are there exemptions for delivery of those services?
So we recognize that there are a lot of students with special needs across Michigan, and we want districts to support students and their IEPs to the fullest extent that they are able. We recognize that there are unique challenges in a situation where you can't have person-to-person contact, and that is something that is an issue. If a student needs occupational therapy services, it may require that additional sessions will be needed after the state of emergency is over, and we are mindful of that. And when this executive order expires, that is something that I think we will continue to work on. Those services are not canceled. They may need to be delayed until we beat this virus, but we anticipate living up to the IEPs that our students rely on and that our families rely on as well.
On the school year, what other options, if any, did you consider?
I don't know that there are a lot of other great options. I think the question was, how do we ensure that we're empowering districts to meet the challenges that they confront and make use of assets that they might have available. I think the biggest challenge, Rick, is that with the disparate educational system that we've had in Michigan, that there are very different challenges across our state. And it's not just flipping a switch and saying everyone can go online, because broadband's just not available in areas. Not every child has access to a device. Not every school district has the ability to devise and instruct an online course that meets the needs of the kids. And so that's why this really has to be in close partnership with the local leadership to ensure that each child has access to the kind of distance learning that they're going to need. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
That is Governor Gretchen Whitmer giving us an update on her executive order that she signed this morning, which suspended the remainder of the school year for in-person learning and then sets forth some guidelines for districts to create these plans for how they're going to educate kids and how that's going to work in each district with different needs that they have, whether it's through online learning. You just heard her talking about the fact that not everyone has access to that, so it's really online and distance learning. This is a look at how many other states have already closed for the year, so we're number 9 now to close for the year. I want to bring in News 8's Rick Albin is looking into what this will mean for the budget. It's going to have to look different as these districts try to bring everyone online and make sure they have access to it. That's going to cost money. So Rick Albin is looking into how that will impact the state budget. He'll go over that for you on News 8 at noon here in the next 30 minutes. As we continue to follow this news, we know superintendents are now making plans for how to move forward. Wherever you are, that is going to look different. Some of it might mean picking up packets. Some of it might mean that teachers and principals even are dropping off Chromebooks so that you can access some of their plans that they're putting forth through apps like Seesaw. We do want to take a moment to thank all of the teachers who, in addition to being at-home parents now, are also working from home for all of their kids in their classrooms. And now we know that that is going to look a little bit different moving forward as districts try to figure out exactly what their plans are to meet all of these needs. We'll go over a lot more of this announcement on News 8 at noon. We know that as far as the social distancing and stay-at-home orders, based on this video from Drone 8, people are listening. We can see empty streets in downtown Grand Rapids, and the governor has said she hopes that you will continue to follow that as we try to deal with the COVID-19 crisis in Michigan. Our coverage will continue coming up in 30 minutes on News 8 at noon.
For